On this episode of Wealth Talks, we are talking about budgets. Personally, we do not have a budget. We don't like budgets, but budgets are what we're talking about.
Michelle, I don't think you would really prefer me to put you on a budget.
Absolutely not.
And yet that happens a lot of times. A spouse will put their spouse on a budget so that they can't spend money outside these parameters. And that's not liberating, that's restrictive and controlling.
Well, it would be quite a different thing if you and I talked and agreed on a budget or what we were going to spend and then acted accordingly, not you lording it over me or me lording it over you. And that's kind of what we do with our finances, but we don't call it a budget, and we're not using a strict budget as some budgets are.
You are spending less than what you make, which is important. And maybe some people think of that as a budget. Because a budget to some people is limiting, and to other people, it's just part of the way that you manage your money. I think of budget as synonymous. It can mean the limited type, and it can mean the more flexible type of management that you're spending less than you make, and you watch that over time, but it's not necessarily a negative thing. So I think of both under the term budgeting.
Well, John, long before you were born, one of my patients, Gil Liming, whom I've talked about before on this show, taught me to think in percent when we look at money. And I think that's really important. When we are spending money, how much percent is that of what we're earning at the moment? And because we've always lived on not a steady income, never know what's coming in at the end of the month, we have to be flexible and think about, oh, this came in today. This is the percentage I can spend on this. And this is the percentage I should be keeping because it might not come in tomorrow.
So you asked Gil to share some financial knowledge with you to help you be a better manager of your finances. And he gave you an example from the grocery store.
He did. And back in the day, green beans were selling at the grocery store for 33 cents a can or 34 cents a can. They were all canned in the same factory, which was just down the road from my office. And he said, the quality's the same. When you go to the store, which one are you going to buy? And I said, well, I'm Scottish, so I'm going to probably buy the 33 cent. And he says, why? I said, because I'm saving a penny. And he said, I told you to think in percent.
If we take that lesson and apply it to budgeting, so to speak, especially for a business owner that has fluctuating income, it's very helpful to think in percent rather than in fixed dollar amounts. Somebody who's making a paycheck every period and they plan to continue doing that, maybe it's not as critical for them to think in percent, although it is if they want to move beyond that. But what happens with thinking in percent, if we apply a budgeting system, that's where we like to talk about the 10-20-70 principle. You take 100% of your income, 10% of that is yours to keep. That's your savings, at least what you should be saving. 20% is the maximum that you should be paying to creditors, and 70% is for lifestyle.
Well, that 10% comes right off the top. And some people call that paying yourself first in a budget. And I suppose we could call the 10-20-70 principle a budget in a certain way, but it's based on a fluctuating income because not everybody makes the same paycheck every 2 weeks or every month. And so we have to be able to think outside a restrictive budget and go with the flow.
So I have a practical example here. Sometimes people are shocked to hear how much we would spend for groceries in a month. Well, we're feeding usually 10 people. But, for someone else who has a household of 4 people, that budget is going to be quite different. So to compare budget and, they could say, hey, well, we spend a whole lot less on groceries. Well, we've got to think in percent. How many people are we feeding? And perhaps we're actually spending less per person. There's that percent coming in. We may be actually spending less per person. So just hearing numbers doesn't mean anything.
When we bought a van to haul all of our children around, all 8 of them, miles per gallon per person was less than one of these electric vehicle cars that are hybrids. And people would say, oh, you're driving a gas guzzler. But at the same time, if we looked at the overall percentage, we were more efficient than someone driving a hybrid car that's getting 54 miles to the gallon.
Another way that you budgeted as we were growing up is when we would go to the grocery store. We would see those electrical ponies that they would often have at the front of stores. I don't see those too often anymore. And you never encouraged us to ride those. You would say, well, do you want to use our money to ride the pony, or would you rather save up our money and go for a real carousel ride? And when we put it that way, it helped us to see budgeting in a positive light instead of something negative that we weren't getting. Instead, we got to enjoy something better for delaying that gratification.
Sometimes a budget that is so rigid that you have to spend this much on groceries, this much on utilities, this much on, your entertainment, this much on, eating out, it can get kind of boring. And I was just reading an article the other day that 1 out of every 4 people is bored with their life. And that made me think, wow, what is causing this boredom? Is it because they have rigidly structured their life about, I can't do that because it's out of my budget? Are they spending everything that they possibly can every week of their budget so that they don't think far enough ahead and say, well, if I don't do my entertainment this week, then next week I can double that and I can do something extra special, like go on a carousel ride instead of just an electric pony for 3 seconds outside a grocery store.
Or providing for a concert experience rather than little bits of entertainment. And we see this all the time, too, with people who, they're just going to a garage sale, but they're spending all their nickels and dimes. And if they would just save that money and maybe buy a larger ticket item, might even be at a garage sale, but at least they're not just frittering their money away along the way just because they have it and they can spend it. It's part of their budget this month.
And that boredom factor often leads to something called retail therapy, which then triggers debt, which we talked about in our last episode of how that is just a killer of creativity and actually financial bondage.
I can think of a very practical example nowadays how people want to do their meal prep. You hear a lot about people doing meal prep where they will prepare all their lunches for the week, maybe on Saturday or Sunday, most often Sunday I see, and they've got their containers set out and they've cooked their chicken, they've chopped their vegetables, and they are putting everything into the container on Sunday so that they've got their lunches lined up for all week. What we don't see in those videos is Wednesday when they open that up and it's the same thing they've eaten Monday or Tuesday. And maybe it's not that bad on Wednesday, but Thursday and Friday follow. And no wonder people are feeling boredom. You get the same meal for 5 days. Yes, you saved money, you saved time, but sometimes you don't want to eat that meal. And you might even break down, say, no, I'm going to go get a sandwich instead, or I'm going to go get a burrito instead, or I'm going to go out instead. And now, have we really saved time and money? It was a good idea to budget that way, but it got boring.
Budgeting can be beneficial if it's something that's comfortable and affordable to you. And first of all, it has to be affordable or you can't even begin to do it. But it's got to be comfortable too. You don't want to eat, like our son Jesse, pasta salad every day of the week for several weeks in a row, even though he loves pasta salad.
Yeah, so there's a little more story behind this. Jesse was going to be employed at a place where he had to leave really early in the morning. He needed to take lunches. Jesse does not care for sandwiches, but he loves pasta salad with all kinds of vegetables, olives, sometimes some meat in it, different cheeses, and he loves it. So he wanted pasta salad. I said, well, is there anything else that you want? Oh, I love pasta salad. Okay, so I made pasta salad, and guess what he had for 5 days a week? That's kind of like that meal prep thing. Well, it was fine that first week. But to the end of the second week, he came to me and he said, I still like pasta salad, but I'm getting a little bored of it. And so we talked about some other things and came up with some other ideas. And then, having a lunch of pasta salad here and there was great, but not a steady diet of it.
After the break, we're going to talk about what we do that's different so that you don't have to be bored with your finances.
Policy design is critical to having cash value early in your policy and having it grow quickly. Regular whole life insurance starts out with little to no cash value and a relatively high death benefit. But Nelson Nash, the founder of the infinite banking concept, said, "Your need for cash during your life is greater than your need for death benefit." That's true. So if you design the policy differently with a paid-up additions rider, you can bring that cash value up sooner and cause it to grow better and reduce the death benefit a little bit. This is good because your need for cash during your life is greater than your need for death benefit. Over the years, the cash value and the death benefit are going to grow in a well-designed policy like this until your death benefit is actually higher than it would be in a regular whole life insurance towards the end of your life, which statistically is when you're most likely to need it. That is a win all the way around, and that's the way we write policies here at McPhee Insurance. If you want a well-designed policy that's designed to have cash value early and have its cash value grow quickly, there's two ways you can get it. You can get it from us here at McPhee Insurance. That's the way we write policies. Or if you have an insurance agent you know, like, and trust already, then you can use our resources that we publish on McPheeInsurance.com and on YouTube, McPhee Insurance, to learn how to read a whole life insurance illustration, how a good policy should be designed, and you can use that information along with the agent you know, like, and trust to write a policy that will work for you. And once it is all set up and ready to go and you're ready to purchase the policy, if you want to double check it, you can use our insurance review service and we'll let you know if it's a good policy or not. It's well worth the $75 to have that peace of mind. If you want good life insurance or you want your life insurance reviewed, you can contact us by phone at 702-660-7000 or by email. Our email is team@mcpheeinsurance.com.
To be effective, a budget needs to be practical. You know, the story's told about the woman on the street approached by a homeless person asking for $1 for a sandwich. And the women usually say, well, I'd have to see the sandwich first. That's practical. Michelle, you're very practical, and you run our home very practically.
One of the things that I like is to have a routine rather than a schedule. A schedule can be limiting because if you say that you're going to have the whole household up at 6:30 in the morning, you can have breakfast at this time, and you're going to start the laundry at this time, and people are leaving at this time. Well, yeah, they might need to leave at that time. But maybe it was a night up with the little ones because they were sick. And so maybe you don't hop out of bed right that quick. Maybe breakfast is delayed a little bit because somebody couldn't find something. And so you went to go help them find their socks or their shoes or whatever it was. So we had a routine, but not a rigid schedule because the people are more important than keeping the exact time on the clock. And so that's why I had a routine that could be flexible to handle whatever situation arose and so that we could be successfully living, not just driven by the clock.
And that's really what a budget should be. It should be flexible. It should be a plan rather than a rigid structure that if we don't meet it, we get discouraged or browbeaten that we failed. And oftentimes then people don't get back into getting back on their feet financially, and they stay burdened with financial slavery.
I used to think about planning out a couple weeks or even a month for the major projects that I needed to get done. And sometimes you do need to schedule major things that need to happen, but I found that it was more effective and more efficient to set weekly goals and then make sure that I fit the other things I needed to do in around that. And just by working on a week-to-week basis was more efficient than trying to go out 2 to 4 weeks because that was too rigid of a schedule, and I would get off track long before I got to those 2 weeks or a month.
That makes me think of when you were in chiropractic practice and you would see your patients and you would make a care plan for them, taking them from where they were with their health at that point to where they wanted to be. And you outlined a plan, but along the way, you did evaluations to see, are we going to hit our goal? or do we need to make an adjustment along the way so we reach our goal? And that's what we're doing. It should be what we're doing in all areas of our life, but especially in finances, since that's what we're talking about. We want to make sure that we're hitting our goals, and where we spend each penny along the way isn't necessarily what we need to focus on, but the overall goal. And sometimes we're a little off balance, and so we need to make adjustments along the way. But always keeping our mind on that goal in the end will help us in our daily decisions of what we need to spend and where we need to spend.
And then there are some things that are helpful to have on the schedule. We do our house cleaning once a week at the same time every week, because everybody in the family could pitch in to help. And it takes an hour instead of one person taking several hours throughout the week.
6:30 every Thursday morning, we're up and cleaning house before breakfast. Once in a while, we've made an evaluation the night before and said, is everyone good if we start at 6:45 instead? Or occasionally even at 7 o'clock. And we evaluate our schedules, decide what will work, and make an exception for that week based on what our situations are.
One of my favorite sayings is that if it's not on the calendar, it's not going to happen. But that's more of a plan rather than a rigid structure. The McPhees are really known for, when we take a vacation, that we try to cram everything in that's possible. And
everything that's not possible.
And we always end up not doing many of the things that were put on our plan. But if they weren't on there, they would have never got done anyway. And so as many things as we can put on there means that we're going to get at least some of them done.
Another area I often think about the kitchen because, I do a lot of preparing of meals, shopping for meals, and then serving of meals. We gather for family dinner every night and often have company as well. And something that a lot of people focus on is meal planning. And there's a lot on social media about planning out your meals. I know people who sit down once a week and they're working on everything they're going to serve for the week. And although it's a really good idea to, kind of have a plan for what you're going to do, so you're not quickly, it's 5:30, we need to have something to eat. Let's go to get takeout, or, got to make a last minute grocery shopping trip. When I was first young and starting with a family, it was really popular to do this 30-day meal preparation and put it in the freezer. So all you had to do for the other 29 days of the month was take that meal out of the freezer and pop it in the oven. Well, first of all, you killed yourself on the days that you were doing all this meal prep for 30 meals. And then I had a friend who actually decided to do this. And then she told me, day 23, I didn't want to eat what was scheduled for that day. And then, of course, any garden produce that they were given or had grown in their garden was not accounted for. So they actually ended up spending more money. They didn't want to eat what was prepped, and so they would go and buy it. It's not necessarily bad to plan a few days in advance, but I find that making sure I have a well-stocked pantry allows me to budget my time and finances better when I have this pantry that is well stocked.
You just used the word budget your time. So it's not that we're opposed to budgeting. We're opposed to the rigidity that budgets place on someone's life. We're opposed to the fact that budgets often feel like they're controlling someone from doing what they really want to do. We're against the budgets that say, I've got to spend all this money or I won't have any next time. It's not that we don't budget. It's just that we don't like the connotations that come with budgeting. And so we prefer to talk about money management or planning to manage our money. And it gives us just a little bit more liberty, and it allows us to be a little more creative and a little bit more flexible in our life. It comes down to three major things that we talk about in Winning Your Financial Game. It's a book we wrote a while back, and there's just three things that help us really get ahead financially. And that is, we have to have a desire to be somewhere where we're not today. And then it takes something called determination. And determination really comes down to choices that we make. In fact, that's a synonym for determination is a choice. What kind of choices are you making right now in your life, in your budget, Is it something that is liberating? Is it something that's moving you forward to your desire? And then the final thing is discipline. Once we know what our desire is and we've made the choices to make it happen, now we have to have the self-discipline. And here we're not talking about the rigidity of a discipline where we're going to crack a whip over someone. That comes from the Latin form of the word discipline. We're talking more about the French form of the word discipline, which means that we're going to discipline ourselves so that we can win the race. It's like the athlete that wants the gold medal.
Well, Zig Ziglar said that when you're tough on yourself, life is infinitely easier on you. Be sure to cultivate that self-discipline in your budgeting.
Whether you are stocking your pantry, budgeting your time, or managing your money, remember, how you do anything is how you do everything.
And be sure to come back next week when we'll talk about more things that create wealth in your life right here on Wealth Talks.